The scripture message this morning is from Luke chapter 24. It's the story of the walk to Emmaus. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they came, did not find his body there. They came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. And as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the word of the Lord.
Some of our churches within the United Methodist denomination, we celebrate the sacrament of Holy Communion once a month. One of the nice things about being Methodist is that that is not a hard and fast rule. You will go to some Methodist churches that participate in the sacrament of Holy Communion on a weekly basis. Some who decide that it is sufficient once a quarter, but it is up to the congregation and the minister to determine how that would be best for their own congregations. But no matter whether we do it once a week, once a month, once a quarter, I think that it is important for us to check in. And let's make sure we aren't just going through the motions, because there is so much more to the sacrament of Holy Communion. Some of what I'm going to share with you today is from the United Methodist Book of Worship and the United Methodist Book of Discipline, and that probably makes sense since we are United Methodists. find that they are more reaching across denomination lines than some would like to think. So what kind of spiritual benefits do we receive from Holy Communion? What divine love and power is it? Through our participation in this sacrament, what do we receive? Well, to begin with, not only do we celebrate it at different times, but we also call it different names. It is called the Lord's Supper, Holy Communion, or the Eucharist. Each of these is taken from the New Testament. In Acts 2, 46 and 47, the early Christians broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. In 1 Corinthians 10:17, we read, "Because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread." In Luke 22:19 and in 1 Corinthians 11:24 and 25, we read, "Do this in remembrance of me." Calling us the Lord's Supper reminds us that it is a meal instituted by Jesus, our Lord, and hosted by Him at His table whenever it takes place. Calling it Holy Communion reminds us that it is an act of holy and intimate sharing, making us one with Jesus and His body. Calling it the Eucharist, which is a term taken from the Greek word meaning thanksgiving, we are reminded that giving thanks to God for all that God has done is an essential part of this meal. When we use different names, we acknowledge that no single name can contain the meaning of this very sacred act. As United Methodists, we believe communion is a sacrament, a vow or a promise. Sacraments are means of grace by which God works invisibly in us by strengthening and confirming our faith in Him. A sacrament is God's pledge of love and faithfulness to us, and our answering pledge of allegiance to God. The sacrament of Holy Communion is an act of worship ordained by Christ and is a means of grace. It's important to understand that because we participate in the sacrament, we are not anymore worthy of God's grace, but rather we open ourselves to the all-encompassing love that is already there. And we become more open and ready to receive and respond to God's love through our participation. One might say the sacraments are a way God communicates with us in a way that we, in all of our brokenness and limitations, can receive and experience God's grace. Jesus Christ Himself was the ultimate manifestation of a sacrament. The ultimate manifestation of God's vow, God's promise. God's nature and purpose were revealed and acted in and through this human body. In following with biblical and Christian teaching, we believe that we are sinners, constantly in need of divine grace. We believe that God is gracious and loving, always making available the grace we need. Grace is God's love toward us, God's free and undeserved gift. Words that describe how different kinds of grace work in our lives include prevenient grace, which is that grace that comes before anything we do ourselves. Prevenient grace is unmerited, unearned, for you see, it is a gift. Convicting grace makes us conscious of our sinfulness and urges us to repent. Justifying grace forgives and puts us into right relationship with God. Sanctifying grace enables us to grow in holiness of life. Perfecting grace molds us into the image of Jesus. Grace gives us the freedom of will to be able to respond to God. God seeks us out, pursues us, calls us to come into the loving relationship that we were created to enjoy. This grace of God is made available to us through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and works in our lives through the presence of the Holy Spirit. John Wesley helps us understand how we are to receive and respond to God's grace through the public worship of God, the ministry of the Word, the supper of the Lord, family and private prayer, searching the Scriptures, fasting, and being in conversation and meeting together in groups for nurture and accountability. The quadrilateral. The Wesleys understood and taught forgiveness, the presence of Christ, mystery, healing, nourishment, and holiness, and they knew that Holy Communion was and continues to be to this day a powerful means through which divine grace is given to God's people. Our sacramental understandings and practices today are grounded in this heritage. Holy Communion is a mystery too deep for words. Its meaning is unique to each one of us. But there are three essential elements that we proclaim in our service. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. Christ has died. Communion is a time to remember. We remember the love, the sacrifice, and the suffering of Jesus. We follow his command as he ate his last meal with his disciples. Do this in remembrance of me. But we must not stop at the death of Jesus. We move on as we remember that Christ is risen from the grave. The bread and the cup represent the living Christ's presence among each of us. We do not claim that the elements actually become the body and blood of Christ. We believe that the change is spiritual. It is inside of each and every one of us. By partaking of the bread and the cup, we become one with Christ in spirit and with each other as we move towards service in the world. And in Holy Communion, we celebrate the final victory of Christ and anticipates God coming reign. Christ will come again. We are partners with God in creating this future with the understanding that the demands of discipleship are hard. In the bread and the cup of the Lord's Supper, in the fellowship of Christian friends and family gathered at the table, we find the nourishment and sustenance we need for the tasks ahead. We receive physical and spiritual nourishment through Holy Communion. As we encounter Christ in the Lord's Supper and are repeatedly touched by divine grace, we are becoming shaped into Christ's image. Through the sacrament, we receive healing and are able to help others heal. We are enabled to perform our ministry and mission to continue God's work in the world. The work of redemption, reconciliation, peace, justice, become aware of the worth and needs of all of God's children. Some may ask if they are worthy. None of us are truly worthy. But we come to participate in Holy Communion out of our hunger, out of our need and our desire to receive God's unconditional love, for us to receive healing and forgiveness. We come to the table to renew our hearts. We come to renew our spirits. We come to remember, and we come to receive God's grace. So what are the spiritual benefits of receiving Holy Communion? What do divine love and power do in and for us through our participation in this particular sacrament? The spiritual benefits we receive include the chance again to renew our vow and our pledge to God. It gives us the opportunity to come forward and open ourselves up to receive God's grace. Divine love and power give us nourishment for the task at hand. It helps guide us on our journey, and again, it gives us strength. This is the Lord's Supper. It is not ours. And it is Christ who invites you to come. If you are open and desiring to build your relationship with God, you are invited to come. Far be it from us to refuse anyone who comes forward to desire to receive God's grace. When we begin Holy Communion, I invite you to search your heart and your soul. Open yourself up to God's love. Open yourself up to unconditional acceptance. Open yourself up to receive prevenient grace. Grace that is unmerited, it is unearned, and it is given to all of us as a gift. Holy Communion. I must share with you that it is one of my most meaningful tasks as a member of clergy. It is not only my opportunity to be with you, but it is my opportunity to renew myself as well. And when I have the chance to look into your faces, we connect. The relationship becomes more solidified. Brothers and sisters, I hope that this is not merely a mindless act for you. I hope that as you take the steps, you too may be those men who are walking on the road to Emmaus. You too may sense the presence of something that is unexplainable. You too feel the mystery that none of us will ever be able to identify.